today, the primary scripture that we're going to talk about is Romans 12:10. So if you have your iPhone Bible or regular Bible, you can look at Romans 12:10. I think my version is New Living Translation. But Romans 12:10 says, "Love each other with genuine affection and take delight in honoring each other." This is my life verse. It was passed on down from my father. And today we get to honor mothers. And so I'm going to start off. I found a really neat quote, and it's actually by a person unknown. So no idea, but I thought it was perfect for today. "If at first you don't succeed, try doing it the way mom told you to in the beginning." Can I have an amen from moms? So you are oddly correct sometimes. So, this morning we're going to talk about honoring because it's the most important thing on earth, by the way. Sometimes I really don't get you Christians. I don't know what that makes me, but I find it fascinating how the evil one can derail someone who claims to be a disciple of Christ on the stupidest matters, on doctrine and theology. And I said stupid and then said doctrine and theology, and I did that purposely because it's not the point. What I love about Romans 12:10 in the NIV version, sometimes they put little headings, and it says love in action. And then it gives Romans 12:10. Love in action. And that's Christ's definition of love, is doing, right? Love isn't a feeling. You don't fall in love. You choose to love. You decide to love. You can fall in emotion and you can fall in feelings, but you can't fall in love because love is a choice. And moms make that kind of choice and fathers make that kind of choice. But Jesus commanded that the two most important things that you need to worry about, and everything else can be summarized under these two things, are to love God and love others. So all the other stuff that you get hung up on, and you're not allowed to do this and don't do that, you really just need to be more concerned about loving God and loving others. And what does that look like? And how do I do that? And so this morning I wanted to share a little bit about how my mother loved me growing up. I grew up in a very happy household. So it wasn't a perfect home by any stretch, but it was a very happy home, and my parents were supportive. Sometimes sometimes I feel like I wish I had like this really cool testimony. Like my father abandoned me, and I was living on the streets, strung out on heroin, and then the Lord appeared. I had really loving parents who were super supportive, an older brother who loved to be an older brother, and a sister that used to dress me up as a girl. Says a lot. And so my mother, she was encouraging, she served me, she supported me, she looked for things in me that stood out, and she promoted those things. I could see you doing this, and you were so wonderful at that. And I did sports, and I did every sport, and she was at every game and loved being there, right? It wasn't an obligation for her, which is a really nice feeling. Right? You feel most loved, I think, when it doesn't come across as an obligation, or that I guess I'm supposed to, but that I want to and I desire to, and you're valuable to me, and I want to place high value on you. And she did a wonderful job doing those things. And one of my fondest memories of childhood, every morning from 0 to 18, my mother would awaken me with a song. I mean, every single morning, if I was in the home or around her, she would wake me up singing one song. This is the day that the Lord has made. Okay? And you're familiar with that one, I'm assuming. It's a classic, and it was very cheery and very uplifting and very positive, and those are some of my most fond memories of her bursting into the bedroom full of light and energy and shouting at the top of her, singing at the top of her lungs, "This is the day." And then she'd like fling the curtains open. And I'm telling you, to this day, I'm a morning guy. She trained me. I'm like, let's do it. And my wife is not such, let's just say it hasn't been my children's experience. Well, actually, I do it, oddly enough. I just don't sing that song. It's a song by 50 Cent, so I don't want to get into the lyrics. It is not a song by 50 Cent. Eminem. So, every morning this is how I was greeted to the day. And it was really, truly a blessing. And it was one of the ways that she showed that I was highly valuable. Okay, which is the most important thing. The thing that I would love for you to leave, this building from, this place of worship today, is single-handedly being most stressed out about how am I going to love God today and how am I going to love others today? How am I going to show people that they're valuable? How am I going to meet their needs? How am I going to serve you? And I think Bobby's going to get very angry with me. So, with a name like Bobby, how angry can he get? What are you, 12? Hey, Bobby, you want to go outside and play? I'm coming. I'm sorry. How come it never got to Bob? Oh, the CEO mom. I get it. Executive decisions. I like it. And then Josh was born. What? And so honoring people and placing high value and doing things that are meaningful and from the heart and come from the wellspring of your love affair with Jesus Christ, that's how we want to live life, right? That's how we want to live out practically. Romans 12:10 is you take delight in honoring each other, loving each other with genuine affection. But here's the problem. Moms aren't perfect. And suddenly the Mother's Day sermon took a dark turn. Right? Dads aren't perfect. Pastors aren't perfect. Children aren't perfect. Josh in particular is not perfect. Even though you're a very handsome man, he's not perfect. So the problem in life where people tend to get hung up when it comes to honoring each other is that you got to earn it, right? You got to treat me well, and if you're not very nice, I'm not going to be very nice. Or maybe the worst sin of all is that maybe I'm not going to overtly treat you poorly, but I'm certainly not going to honor you because you don't honor me, and we make it conditional, right? Because people are imperfect. They're not going to get it right all the time. Sometimes it's a long season of imperfection and hurt, and you don't take delight in honoring them, right? You don't have genuine affection for the people that are mistreating you or that are off. Unfortunately, if you want to be a disciple of Christ, then they will know you by your love for others. So how do you treat the difficult people is what really matters. And Bobby asked me that this morning, like, what are you struggling most with? And that's where the Holy Spirit has just been harassing me, and I call them the difficults, right? The ones that aren't being very nice to you. And sometimes it's legitimate. You're not making it up, and you're not lying about them. They are truly wounding you or treating you in a highly dishonoring way, the exact opposite of what we're commanded to do. And many times those people doing it claim to be followers of Jesus Christ, which is just ugly, and it hurts, and it gets messy. And so as fond as my childhood was, and as precious as that memory of my mother bursting in the mornings in my bedroom singing, "This is the day," she wasn't perfect. And never was this more proven than March 6th, 2016, which is the day that my father graduated to heaven. And if you've heard of my dad, Dr. Gary Smalley, I share that a lot now just because when you have a famous father and he's graduated to heaven and people, they come up to you and they're like, hey, oh my gosh, I love your father. What is he doing? Or what's he up to is my favorite. And I go, well, he's dead. So I have like a sick, dark, sarcastic sense of humor, if you haven't picked up on that yet. And so for me, my father's death has been a gold mine of horribly inappropriate things. It's my favorite. It really is. And so when people make the mistake, I go after their jugular because I believe in honoring each other. And so on March 6, 2016, it was the end of about 18 months of my wife and I caring for my father in a home hospice kind of situation. So he had, in 2003, had a heart attack, and that was, I think, in March or April, and then by November, he needed a kidney transplant because the heart attack caused a kidney disease, and he was in trouble, and, it's never a fun thing to go on dialysis, and he needed a kidney. So in 2003, I donated said kidney, and so I have one less kidney, and he took it with him to the grave. Very selfish. I thought I could get it back, but apparently. So I was able to honor him and love him by serving and donating a kidney. And, if you don't know about the Smalleys, then I can tell you that if it can go wrong or be disastrous or like an epic, bizarre thing, that's sort of our legacy. And so I actually stand, kidney donation is a wonderful gift, by the way, and it is really very standard procedure now, and no kidney donor has ever died donating a kidney, and I'm the only one who almost did. I'm it. One person. In the history of kidney donations, I flatlined, my lungs collapsed, they removed one of my ribs, they tore this shoulder. I don't even know how you get a shoulder torn when they're taking a kidney out of your body. That one I'm still a little questioning on. Like, I don't know what they were doing with my body in that surgery room, but I have some questions. And so it was a disaster for me, but normally it goes smoothly. So it is no shock that my father's graduation to heaven was spectacular. And as my wife and I cared for him for those last 18 months of his life in our home and outside of Houston, Texas, that was difficult, right? It's not easy watching someone wither away. That is I'd never done it before. I'd never taken care of a dying parent and who's not going to recover and is just kind of going down. And but what's cool is that the legacy both my father and mother built in the kids, I have 2 siblings, is that honoring God and others is the 2 most important things on earth. Those were the rules I grew up with, by the way. I had 2 of them. Honor God and honor others. And so when it was time to step up and take care of him, I stepped up and took care of him. And it was a total blessing. I don't regret it. It was not easy, but I certainly don't regret it. And then on March 6th, I was actually I was in Woodstock, Virginia. So on that Wednesday, March 6th was a Sunday, and on that Wednesday, before I had to leave to come up to Woodstock to do an event, we knew it was coming. It was coming close, and so I asked him, hey, he was still talking, but it was, and I asked him, is there any final thing that you want to say? This is like Gary Smalley, right? And this is my father, and, we were in harmony, but I thought, I don't know, is there anything left that you want to give me or say, just advice, wisdom? And he thought about it, and my father's last words to me were, you need a new truck. Because he hated my truck. And I went, really? And he goes, he laughed, because he's also sarcastic and an incredibly dark sense of humor. As he was going through this process, when he'd be in the hospital, man, this is sick. I don't even know if I should share this. I don't even think I've shared this publicly ever. But it's funny. He, being famous, people would hear that Gary Smalley's on the 5th floor in the hospital, and they might have someone else who's in another room, and then they would come and he would fake dying. And he looked like death, and so it was very believable. And he'd be like, And they'd be like, oh. And I'd be sitting in the room going, I don't even know what to do. And they're looking at me like, why aren't you reacting? I'm like, because he's messing with you. You just don't know it yet. And then he'd be like, hey, gotcha. And I'm like, wow. I go, Dad, this is going to backfire on you. Like, one of these days, God will be using you to comfort them whose husband just died, and you're going to go, oh. And so, he was pretty crazy. And so his last words to me were, you need a new truck. He wanted to slam me one last time. So I came up to Woodstock, and then on Saturday, I was going to speak Saturday night and preach Sunday morning. My wife called and said, you need to get home. Because I thought, 18 months of caring for him, I don't want to be gone when the moment happens. So the church was gracious, and I rushed home, and everyone was there. And so if you want a legacy, right, if you want at the end of your days to be surrounded by people who love you deeply, take delight in honoring them. Because the fruit of honoring others is a close relationship. There's a bond. There's a connection. There's a safety. When you honor others, people want to draw near. Right? I mean, it's why browbeating people and criticizing people and judging people, that isn't the way. That's not how you win someone over. Relationally or spiritually, frankly. But when you take delight in honoring one another, then at your end of days, I don't know, how many business people do I have? And do you really think, if you were like my father, lucky enough to kind of know the time is coming, do you really think that you're going over the big contracts you got and the amount of money you made? I have stood next to billionaires dying alone in a hospice with nobody. And they finally get it. They finally go, all my life, I thought being successful and making money and making other was, and it's not. We were created to be in love with God, to be in love with others. That is the entire point of our existence, is to love God and love others and to be loved. And that's why when our relationships are broken, it's so painful. Is because the thing I want most is going horribly right now. And I'm not being honored, and I'm not being loved well. But Jesus' words and his commands tell us to love them anyways, to honor them anyways, especially, and I want to highlight that word, underline it if you're taking notes, especially when they're difficult, especially when they don't do the right thing, when they don't say the right thing. So it's Sunday evening. All my brother, my sister, their kids, my kids, all of our family. I think 8 or 9 of the grandkids were there. Everybody's there. That is a sign of someone who spent a lifetime making it a priority to honor the ones closest to him. Because we all wanted to be there with him all the way to the end. And so we were out swimming, and my wife was in sitting with my father, holding his hand. They'd become best friends during that entire 18-month process. And I'm out cooking for everybody. And I could see my wife pop up fast. I went, oh, man, here it goes. And I'd never, obviously, again, never done this before. So she comes out, she's like, everybody, you got to come in. And the next thing you know, my father was in that, hospital bed in home hospice. I don't know if you're aware of what home hospice is. I'm assuming you do. So it's such a wonderful thing. And anyone here in the hospice industry, you're the greatest people on the planet. No, you really are. That is such a loving job. Talk about honoring people. Hospice people are amazing. And so they really do bless you when you're going through this kind of thing. And they're there for you, and they take care of your family member or whoever it is, and they take care of you. And so we're all there, and we surround the hospital bed, and my wife is sitting on a chair next to my father, and I pulled up a chair next to her, and she's holding his right hand, and my sister's holding his left hand on the other side, my brother's on that side, and then my mother is standing just behind my father's head, and it's happening really quickly, and we don't know what to do, and all the grandkids. I mean, it was just this unbelievable scene, and then, I kind of start to pray over him, and I have my hand on his chest, and I can feel it. I can feel his heart, and I can feel it weakening and softening and becoming less. And I'm just quietly praying. And all of a sudden, my wife, in her grief, and I have learned that we all do grief differently. And let's just say that my wife's version of grief is, I don't even know how to describe it, but it's kind of like a Middle Eastern woman's war cry. Like, you know that noise? Because I'm telling you, it was quiet, and then it hit my wife, and the noises coming out of that woman's mouth were so intense and so guttural. I mean, she deeply loved my father, and it just came out I mean, it was just huge. It startled me. I'm like, and Lord, my Lord, what is happening? And it's just a messy, guttural, body is shaking sob of the century. I'm like, wow. All right now, here we go. Things are happening. And unfortunately, my wife grew up in what was like an Italian family, even though they're not. Just very loud and boisterous and opinionated, and they escalate. And I, on the other hand, come from the middle of nowhere, England, from the clan of small eyes. This is where I'm from. So if you know anything about British people, we are anything but hyper in our mornings. So we're very subdued, very quiet, very just And so my entire family is like, what is going on here? And I mean, shit is, and I'm like, ah. So I look across, and my brother's looking at me going, dude. And I'm like, dude, I don't know what to say. I'm not going to say anything. He's like, it's all happening telepathically. But it was uncomfortable. It was that loud. I mean, just an explosion of sorrow. And then it got worse. Because across the way from me, my sister finally snaps. And, I mean, you can't make this stuff up. She starts chanting. And this is a tad on the traumatic side for me. Because the memory of this and the sound of it, and I do voices, and I like to do that, but this one is a hard one because, man, it messed with me. So with my wife sobbing, the tears of 1,000 slain soldiers, my sister starts going, and I quote, Daddy, 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 Daddy. Which, a daddy makes sense in the moment. He's going right before us, graduating off to heaven. But that was really weird. And it was a chant, and it was melodic, and it was Daddy, Daddy. And I'm like, what is going on? So my brother and I, again, now, though, with my wife sobbing out of control, practically screaming, my sister chanting, my brother and I get tickled. And if you've ever been in a situation where you know it's inappropriate to laugh, we've both felt, with Dad dying under our hands, maybe this is not the moment to break down. But you know what that's like, right? Because we looked and we're like, I mean, it was horrific. It was so bad because Daddy, blah, Daddy, blah. And my brother like, I'm trying to pretend like I'm crying. We're trying to hold it together. And then it got worse. Oh, yeah. It got much worse. With my wife sobbing, my sister chanting, my father, it's chaos, basically. My father's heart just stops, and I foolishly say, hey, I think it's happening, but it wasn't really yet. And with the sobbing and the chanting and the pressure mounting, my mother, standing at the head of my father on his deathbed, breaks out into song. Do you have a guess on what song she might choose? With my wife, oh, and my sister, Daddy, my mother, suddenly, shockingly, this is the day that the Lord has made. What? That the Lord, now wait, hold on. I will rejoice. Wait, what? I will rejoice. And does that feel like a death song? Does that feel like the appropriate choice? Not at all. And I mean, both my brother and I went. And I mean, she's like getting charismatic with it and throwing her hand up. I will. She's emphasizing. I will rejoice. And I will. And I was like, why? Why? And that song. What is the most fond memory of my childhood? Being awoken in the mornings by This Is the Day. And here it is. And I am like, oh, okay. And so with all of this happening, he graduated. That's why that was a term that my wife and father came up with, because she didn't want to talk about death. And I apologize, because I know no one ever talks about death this way. But I mean, I can't hide it. This is what happened. And I think God uses me a lot of times to talk about difficult things that people normally like to avoid. And I just want to make sure that everybody here understands death is coming. It happens. And this is why you want to have a relationship with Jesus Christ. This is why you want to honor the people that God puts into your life, so that on that day you will be surrounded by friends and family as you graduate into heaven. It's not a death. He doesn't stay there in that body. He got to go home where we actually belong, free from the sin and the brokenness and the wounds and the unhealthy churches and the unhealthy parents and the unhealthy fathers and mothers and brothers and sisters. He got to be free from that on March 6th. And so I don't know why we can't talk about it. We've just tried to push that thing out. But I share it this morning because I want to remind you it's coming. I'm sorry. Things are broken. We're all going to go through it, unless he comes back. That'd be awesome timing. Unless he comes back, zoop, hey. I knew it was a good sermon. And so it's happening. And the reason why you want to take delight in honoring each other is because the most important thing, the one thing that's going to matter most to you on that time, during that transition, on your own graduation day, is going to be your relationships. And if they don't feel honored, if they don't feel valued, they're not going to want to be around. They just won't want to. Now, that's not the right move on their part. But that tends to be the consequence, is broken, disconnected relationships when we don't honor each other, especially when it's difficult. And so as my father took his last breath, it quieted down. I made the tremendous error of announcing that it had happened, and that transition from earth to heaven goes incredibly fast. And I started to pray over him once again, and it was just dead silent. My sister had stopped chanting. My wife was sobbing. My mother, praise the Lord, God Almighty, stopped singing. And I got to pray over my father. And it was a precious moment. Even with the chaos, even though my mother ruined my favorite morning song, we could celebrate that because he was a disciple of Jesus Christ. Because we didn't have to mourn because there wasn't a death. It was a graduation. And in true Smalley form, upon my father's graduation, he had one more gift for me. So I thought it had been Wednesday, but apparently it was on Sunday. Because if you're not aware of death and what happens, hospice people know, just because the body shuts down and the heart stops and all the change occurs quickly, doesn't mean things aren't going to happen. So probably 30 seconds after announcing, yeah, this guy knows. Oh, yeah. A good solid 30, 45 seconds. Totally silent. My hand is on his chest. My father, who I'm fairly confident was up in heaven, looking down, he's like, Paul, Peter, you guys got to watch this. Because this is going to be amazing. Because he knows I'm a skittish person. I scare easily. It's so bad. So we're all totally quiet. And not only am I skittish, I have another problem that's kind of related to Tourette's almost. But with everything quiet, my father from heaven goes, and the cerebral cortex is kind of last to go, and it can keep firing. And so many times people will sit up, look around, they'll breathe and gasp. Well, my father goes, I'm like, and I shot straight up in the air, screamed at the top of my lungs a word that I am not proud of. But I'm telling you, I told Bobby this morning, I'm like, man, if you get me, if I injure myself or you scare me really good, I'm going to say this word, whether I'm preaching or my father has just died. And man, if I didn't go, holy, and it rhymes with it, which could be the last word my father ever heard. But I'm like, holy, beep. And I mean, y'all, that scene was priceless. Because we had like 7-year-old, 6-year-old, 9-year-old. There are some young kids. Nobody saw that coming. I'm like, Rah! And I mean, the scatter of chaos. My 23-year-old nephew was standing right over my left shoulder. I go, holy! And he just goes, I mean, like full body, clack. And then I'm like, ha ha! Kids are weeping. The 5-year-old is like, is he a zombie? I'm like, oh my God, that's great. It really happened. And after that, I won't share anymore because I'm telling you, it got weird. Because we didn't know what to do, and how we cope is probably not how you cope. And so it got hectic. It got kind of crazy and weird. My brother and I mean, we couldn't stop laughing, and it was a celebration because we knew where he was going. But I got feeling uncomfortable, and I invited the hospice nurse who'd been doing this for 25 years because she told me. And I took her into the kitchen, and I felt like I needed to apologize because I don't know how you're supposed to act when your father has passed away. And so I bring her in the kitchen. She's like, what's going on? I went, look, I just want to apologize on behalf of the entire family. She goes, really? I went, in particular, the word I just screamed out at the top of my lungs. I go, I don't know how you're supposed to. I'm just assuming this could be coming across offensive. Because it was a celebration for us. It really was. It was a celebration. And she goes, stop right there. Don't you dare apologize. I go, oh, okay. She goes, I've been doing this for 25 years, and I have never been to a better death. And I know, it was a unique compliment. I went, I was like, thank you? I'm telling you, my father's life verse, shockingly, was Romans 12:10. And he lived his life trying to live out Romans 12:10. And it was his biggest priority, no matter how famous he got, no matter how many books or videos were sold. What mattered to him was honoring his wife and his 2 sons and his daughter and his friends and his family and the people around him. And that's what you want. And I promise you, if you practice it, if you ask, if you make that a priority in your own life, if you verbalize that to the people that God has put in your life, that I love you, you matter to me, you are precious, and you are wonderfully made, and you look for the things that they are gifted at, and you highlight those giftings, and you're verbal with it, and you're physical with it, and you show them, and you hug them. See, God uses me often in particularly men's lives who don't know how to have soft touch and don't like to hug. Are there any guys here in the room crazy enough to put their hand up? All right. Oh, that was a bad move. I like that. Thank you. And so God has used me to show them how to hug, and especially when they're like, I'm not really a hugger. And I'm like, you don't have the option. Because your wife needs that. Your daughters need that. Your boys need that. Right? We need to be able to love. We need to be able to touch appropriately. We need to be able to hug. We need to be able to be soft. And we do that verbally. We do that physically. We do that spiritually. We speak into their lives God's truth. We pray over them. See, just delighting and honoring isn't just a single thought or idea. It is a movement that comes from the Spirit of God that is within you if you have chosen to believe in Him and obey Him. When you believe in Him and obey Him, then the outpouring of that belief and obedience is going to be honoring others. So if you're not doing that with the people around you, then you better start asking yourself some difficult questions. Because you need to meet Him. Because it's only through Christ that we can survive the difficulties of this broken world. And because it's tough, and I know every one of you has a story. And it probably has a death, and has hurt, and has woundedness. But Christ came to heal the brokenhearted. And when you allow Him access to heal you, He then instills within you the ability to go out there and honor and love others, especially the people that don't do it correctly. And when you start obeying Him to that degree, you'll never be alone. It's impossible.